Are you an author with a published or soon-to-be published title? Audiobooks are an effective way to increase sales and awareness of your book. Because many people may not have the time to read your book, instead, they turn to audiobooks so they can listen while they walk, exercise, or drive. In fact, according to Edison Research, the audiobook market is growing 30% year over year. So as an author, you can't afford not to release your publication as an audiobook. For information on how you can get your book published as an audiobook on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, visit podcastandradio.com/audiobooks. We have an affordable turnkey production process to get your title on the market. Visit podcastandradio.com/audiobooks. That's podcastandradio.com/audiobooks.
Okay, bibliophiles, grab your cup of caffeine and join me. It's time for your weekly jolt of inspiration. Welcome to Literary Latte. I'm your host, Linda Bouchard, and I've been working with authors and publishers for over 20 years. This show is all about empowering you as writers to think differently, to become that red M&M in a bowl full of brown ones. I'll show you how to navigate the ever-changing landscape of the publishing world. And my superstar guests know where the potholes are, and together we'll help you avoid them on your way to success. If you've ever wondered whether it's too late to start writing that book you've been noodling around in your head, or don't know where to begin because you've really never thought of yourself as a writer, then you're in for a treat, because my guest today came to the craft through the back door. She didn't set out to be a writer, but wow, is she having fun with it now. Hi, I'm Linda Bouchard, your host of Literary Latte, and on this episode, I'll be speaking with Tracy Curtis, an award-winning author, speaker, and former humor columnist for the Charlotte Observer. Before she began writing, Tracy enjoyed a career in radio, film, and television, where she worked as a producer for CNN. Her 3 self-published books are a collection of her syndicated columns. She is currently working on a novel that she hopes to traditionally publish, and we'll talk about the challenges there and oh, so much more. Welcome in, Tracy.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, you and I met when you were a guest speaker at the Charlotte Writers Club. And not only were you hilarious, but it was encouraging to me, and I think to the other writers in the room, in the fact that you didn't have a writing degree or dreams of writing at all. It was rather serendipitous. And to me, that shows that there are so many approaches to the mystery of writing. So why don't you walk us through your journey to publication?
Well, like you said in your open, I really did sort of fall into it backwards. The year was 2005, and I was a big American Idol viewer. And this was the year that Carrie Underwood had won. And our local Fox station was holding a contest. They were going to send someone to Los Angeles to cover the American Idol finale and walk the red carpet. And so, sort of as a joke, I entered this contest and won, and I was sent to LA for this event, and the Charlotte Observer picked up the story about the local mom who was going to LA, and they asked me to blog from behind the scenes. And you have to understand, this was 2005. I didn't even know what a blog was. Mm-hmm. And so they explained to me that I would just sort of I would be sort of their eyes and ears at the event, and I would post into charlotteobserver.com daily and just let people know what was happening. And not really knowing what to write, I just thought, well, I'll try to be sort of funny with it and maybe talk about some things you wouldn't normally see in the newspaper. There was some gossip and some silly stories and a lot of behind the scenes things. And when I got back, the charlotteobserver.com said that the blog had more hits than the Panthers blog.
Oh, wow.
Which sort of surprised me. And they said, well, we didn't know you were a writer. And I said, well, I'm not. I've never written anything in my life. And they said, well, you're really funny. Will you write something else?
Right.
And so that led to sort of a brainstorming session. And they had heard that I was turning 40 and was also having a baby. And so they asked me to blog about pregnancy and 40. So I started a blog called Stork Raving Mad, 40 and Pregnant. And I blogged for the last 20 weeks of my pregnancy. And after that, I was approached by the features editor of the print paper, and they told me that they wanted me to be a new voice in the newspaper and pen a family humor column for the Sunday paper.
Right. And, you talk about that, and it's all about taking risks and putting yourself out there. And you didn't feel like you were a writer, but the process of writing itself sort of evolved and made you think, wow, yeah, I can do this, right?
Yeah, I mean, they really had to push me along because I can't tell you how many times I would call them and say, look, I don't have anything to say. And they said, well, surely that's not the case. You're at home with 2 children, just write about what's happening. And I found out pretty quickly that even though I didn't have a professional writing background and all of my columns are, written in incomplete sentences and start with and but, and I break all the rules, what it was it was very honest. And I found that having children and running a household was hard. And the feedback that I was getting from my readers was, you make me feel normal and you make me feel like I'm not alone and you make me see things that I didn't think were funny before in a different way. And what that did was it kind of helped me find my niche, and it also helped me find my voice as just a normal mom who was going through a normal day, but making you see things in a lighter, funnier way.
Absolutely. And that's one of the great gifts of writing, because it makes you say, yeah, me too. You're not so alone, as you said. Right. So that is just such a beautiful story. And I just love it because of all the serendipity involved in it. But the outcome was so great. And tell me about the process. What happened to get your book, or your columns rather, into the book format, and then your choice to self-publish?
Well, the funny thing is, like I said, I would call the paper every day and swear up and down that I didn't have anything to say. Well, 10 years later and over 500 columns later, I guess I had a lot to say. And as I watched the newspaper go through changes, and I joked that I started to notice that the paper was losing an enormous amount of weight, I thought, the column won't go forever. And so what's going to happen to me as a writer? And it took me 8 years to call myself that, by the way. For a long time, I just felt like I was sort of doing this silly thing that for whatever reason people were enjoying. But over time, I really did start to take it more seriously and wanted to continue a writing career. And I thought, well, am I a one-trick pony? I don't know. But I do know that these columns are good and people like to go back and find old columns, and people were asking me to put together a collection. And so around the holidays in 2015, I thought, all right, I'm going to put together all of my holiday columns into a little Christmas book, and I'm just going to put it out there into the world and see what happens.
How did you, what happened? What platform did you choose to self-publish? And talk about the challenges there, Tracy, so that the listeners can kind of learn a little bit about that, anybody who's thinking about self-publishing.
Well, here are the 2 reasons that I chose to self-publish were it's fast and I have total creative control.
Right.
So here I've got these 500 columns, and I started looking at them, and I thought, you know what? This isn't one book. This is several books. This is a series. And so I started dividing my columns into different kind of subjects. So I have my book Holidays, which is all holiday columns. I have Trophy Mom, which is all about the imperfection of motherhood. And I have Beach Bummed, which is all about summer. And, in my mind, I thought, well, one day I'll have 10 of these, but I wanted to start with these first 3, and I wanted them to come out pretty quickly. So I researched different ways of self-publishing, and I landed on Ingram Spark. And Ingram Spark is out of Tennessee. And the reason I like them is because, number one, the quality of my book is it's impeccable. I mean, it looks like a book that was traditionally published. And they have their own distribution company. So, 39,000 bookstores and libraries. So if you're in New York and you walk into the Strand and say, hey, I'd like to get Tracy Curtis's book, Beach Bummed, they'll say, okay, and it'll be there in the store the next day. And so I like the quality, I like the customer service, and I like the speed with which they were able to publish my books. The hard part about self-publishing, and this was something that I didn't realize when I started the process, is yes, I wanted creative control, but when you have complete and total control, that means you are a one-man band. And so I was responsible for everything. I had to write the manuscript. I had to get it copy edited. I had to create my cover art, design my jacket, secure my blurbs, purchase an ISBN number, purchase a barcode. I had to proof it. I had to order it. I had to market it, and then I had to sell it. Now, I enjoyed doing all that. It was a lot of work, but what I really liked about it was I just wanted to put together a collection of my columns. I wanted to organize it in my own way. I knew what I wanted it to look like. I knew what I wanted the series to look like. And I got to make all of my own decisions. And so for the purposes of doing that, it was the perfect publishing option for me.
Right. Yes, that total creative control over content and design is so important to artists. And you don't get that with traditional publishing. That creative control is just yanked right out from under you. And the process is so much longer.
It is. And, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm in a writing group, and there's a woman in my group who just traditionally published her debut novel. And in watching, like literally firsthand, from beginning to end, watching her write the novel and then hosting her launch party at a local country club, I can tell you firsthand, it was years in the making. Her title was changed 3 times. The plot was reworked. The ending changed. Characters changed. At one point, the cover was going to change. I was really surprised at how little control she ended up having over her product. Now, she's happy with her book, and it's doing well, but it's a different book than what it started out to be. I didn't want that to be the case with my series. It wasn't necessary to have all those people involved. And so for that project, I went the way that I did.
Right, absolutely. And writers have to balance those considerations because everybody's goals are different. So the platforms they choose are different as well. And today, I'm sure maybe you already know this, Tracy, but the traditional publishing companies are actually scrambling because they're following kind of the self-publishing model. Hugh Howey, the author of Wool, is a perfect example of that. He said no to a traditional publisher, self-published, became a gazillion book-selling author, and then the traditional companies came after him saying, we want your title. But he owned it. I mean, you have to take ownership of your craft and your product. And there's also that hybrid model where it's a combination of two, the self-publishing model and the traditional. Did you ever consider that?
Not for this project. And, somewhere along the line, I go to a lot of conferences and I take workshops and I try to learn as much as I can about this business because you can never know everything about the publishing business. But somebody early on asked the question. They said, well, they told us we need to ask ourselves the question, what is the purpose in publishing this book? And so a lot of people, especially like, maybe like a psychologist who has a psychology business, they may want a book that they can sell that kind of enhances their business. So like when they go on television, they can promote their book, which promotes their business. That's sort of what I was thinking. I just wanted to have a complement to my speaking engagements because of what I used to do and my theory that women today are under a lot of pressure. We're trying to have it all and be it all and do it all and look good doing it. I do sort of motivational speaking engagements, and I love having my books to sell because that's the first thing people are going to ask me for when I'm done talking. Well, do you have a book? I want to read your columns. And so the purpose of my publishing was to have something that not only, kept my columns out there in the public for anyone who wanted to read them for the first time or reread them, but also to help build my brand and give me something to constantly be offering my readers. So, I had a purpose for that book. You mentioned I'm working on a novel. My intentions for this book are completely different.
So let's talk about that then, Tracy. Tell me first of all, what the novel, if you can share it, what the novel's about and your experience going in the total other direction of self-publishing, because you say you lost all that creative control, which you do. So what flipped your decision?
Well, just like the American Idol incident, again, I found myself in a situation where I was trying to do one thing and then something else ended up happening. I had gone into one of the big 5 literary agencies in New York and tried to pitch my Humor Me series, the gift books that I had already published, to an agency, hoping that they would represent me and then find me a publisher so that the publishing company could just continue my series so that I could grow it from 3 to 8. The interesting thing in that meeting was I was told that agents and publishers, they don't want previously published material. 2 reasons. 1, it's already out there. And number 2, you've already been paid for it. And so I keep hearing about this 50% rule. So they said, we could do this for you, but only half of your book could be previously published material. 50% of it would have to be new. And this sort of took away from what I was trying to do, which was just, put together collections of previously published columns. So that wasn't working, and the meeting started to go south pretty quickly. They were showing me the door. And when you're standing in a big literary agency, talk about not wanting to, blow your shot.
Wow.
I turned around and I said, well, I have an idea for a novel. And they said, oh, well, come back, sit down, tell us all about it.
Wow.
And I just started thinking really quickly. I thought about this idea for a while, but I'd never said it out loud, and I certainly hadn't pitched it. But I came up with this idea sort of on the spot of a witty family humor columnist, entertains the masses every Sunday in the newspaper, but behind the scenes, her real family is falling apart.
Ah.
And I got that out of my mouth, and they said, we love it. And they said, we think it would make a great novel, and we also think it would make a great movie. And I've always wanted to write a screenplay. So all of a sudden, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is what I'm supposed to do next. And while all this was going on, what was coming was the newspaper was about to cut their freelance budget. So all of a sudden, this all kind of happened at once. My column wasn't going to run anymore. It could have. They offered to let me continue to write my column, but they weren't going to pay me for it. And for all you writers out there listening, let me just go on record as saying I firmly believe that something worth publishing is worth being paid for. And so I decided I would not continue writing my column. It had been 10 years, and as much as the Charlotte Observer pushed me out of my comfort zone and got me writing that column, I felt like it was sort of, again, serendipitous that they were a little bit pushing me out of my comfort zone again and forcing me to think, okay, what's next? And standing in that literary agency and pitching that book and hearing myself talk and looking at their reaction, I thought, this is what I'm supposed to do next.
Wow, that's just great. Yeah, I mean, that is such a leap of faith, too. It must have been kind of scary and exciting all at the same time for you.
Well, it was very funny because I was in New York at the time with my writing group, and they were all down the street waiting to hear, if I had gotten a publisher. And I showed up and they go, well, did you get a publisher? And I said, no, but I think I got a movie deal. And it just is sort of funny how things worked out. Now, I say that nothing could be further from the truth. They're interested and they're waiting for me to write this thing.
Right.
But I imagine you're going to ask me, well, why go traditional publishing instead of just publishing it yourself? I don't really know how to write a novel. While it's going well and I'm figuring it out, and I'm having a lot of fun, by the way, I'm so used to writing 470 words every week. This is different, writing scenery, writing plot, writing dialogue, which I love doing, which I didn't even know that about myself. I do recognize that I'm going to need guidance, and I want someone to weigh in, and I want someone to give me cover ideas, and I want someone to analyze the arc and the characters and the plot and tell me if it's working, tell me if it's any good, tell me if it needs to be reworked. Like, this is where I feel like I want to go through that process, sort of like, anyone who's ever had a baby, you just kind of want to do it the hard way just to know what it's like. And then I want them to take it, and I want them to promote it and market it and sell it. And instead of me driving my books over to Park Road Books where I consign them, have Park Road Books say, oh, we've got to order Tracy Curtis's debut novel and have it in the store. And, I just want to do it a different way this time.
Right. And that analogy of giving birth is so perfect because I use that so much with my clients. It is exactly like that. And, it's like you don't want anybody dissing your baby, you want it to look good. You want it to sound good. So traditional publishing they have so many resources that can help you in that respect.
And I think that I also, like I said, I don't want to lose creative control. I think if you find the right agent, and I don't know, in the end, I don't know if they'll sign me. And in some ways, to me, it's win-win. They'll either sign me and I'll have an agent and hopefully they'll make the deal, or they won't sign me. And then I'll say it, get to go through the query process because I'm so fascinated with that. I would love to be querying and seeing what people have to say and getting their feedback. I've watched my friends go through it, and I think that process is fascinating when you actually write what your book's about and who you are, and you pitch it, blindly, and solicit agents to just kind of see what the response is and get the feedback. And then, hopefully it's a two-way street. I'll only pitch people that I trust that I trust will understand me and get what the book's about, which is finding your voice. And I'm just going to have to trust that they're going to give me the best advice they can. And, I don't know. I just kind of want to experience that whole process, even though I know we won't see this book for a couple of years. I just kind of want to experience it.
Right. That's awesome. And I'm sure that your writing the columns is a great training ground for making it really tight and short, those pitches. And it also focuses you. It helps you distill the content of the book and really bring it together in a, very short description. So that kind of focuses you too, don't you think?
Yeah, well, in some ways I feel like I'm cheating because it is somewhat autobiographical. the reason that the pitch was, she's a family humor columnist, but behind the scenes, her real family's falling apart. It's sort of what happened to me. I was the funny family humor columnist for the Charlotte Observer, but I was going through a divorce. And so there was this real juxtaposition, of what I was writing about these funny things that were happening in my life, but there was also like the underbelly to, the marriage. And so the book is sort of an exaggerated version of my story. I never set out to mislead my readers. In the book, my protagonist she'll desire to live her dream life out in the newspaper to make her home life feel better to herself. And so it's a little bit of a take on something that was real, but it'll be a lot different. I mean, clearly it's fiction, and she's not me, and the husband isn't my ex-husband, and all of those things. But, right. I'm a firm believer in, write what you know. And the thing about that whole situation was I started out writing by saying, I don't have anything to say. And in the end, I had a lot to say. And through the process of writing my column for 10 years, somewhere in those years, I found myself and I found my voice. And that's what the book is about. It's about finding your voice.
Wow. That's such a beautiful takeaway for our listeners, that the process of writing is a process of self-discovery. And I think that's just a wonderful, a wonderful thing to experience. And it's not until you actually sit your butt down in the chair and do it. And it takes such great discipline. So, Tracy, if you could leave us today with a piece of wisdom or advice for anybody just starting out in their career and looking for a path towards publication, what would that be?
Oh, gosh, the thing that I would tell anybody and everybody, and what I tell kids when I go and speak at like the high schools, is everyone has a story. Everyone can write their story. And really, only you can write your story. And I feel like every Sunday in the Charlotte Observer, I was writing my story. And now I'm going to write a story about writing my story. And you don't have to be a professional writer. You don't have to be a trained writer. What you do have to have, and this is something that all writers have to have, is a voice. And we all have a voice. We all have a unique voice. And it's up to us to decide how best we're going to use our voice. And so I would encourage anyone who wants to write anything, whether it's a short story or a novel, to take that leap of faith. Because if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Well, Tracy, this has been such a great time with you. Thank you so much for being with me today and sharing your thoughts and your experiences. And wow. Listen, if anybody wants to see how Tracy is doing with her book, where can they find you, Tracy?
I'm at www.tracyleecurtis.com.
Wonderful. And if you want more information about Tracy, how the book is coming, how to book her for your group, or where to buy all of her other fabulous books, you can find that on my website, Booking Authors Inc., Inc. with a K.com. Tracy, thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Literary Latte with Linda Bouchard. For more information, visit bookingauthorsinc with a K.com.